This is part 2 or chapter 2, so part 2 of our first exam, our Unit 1 exam. Okay, I hope you got the terms down. Okay, so where do we leave off? So this is starting chapter 2 in the America's History, or the Bedford St. Martin book. Okay, first big topic, Columbian Exchange. So hopefully you know this one. It's the exchange of plants, animals, and diseases between the Old World and the New World. Okay, now there's a lot of positive effects of the Columbian Exchange. For example, it really helps out Europe, right? So Europe gets a lot of good food crops, corn, potatoes, and those are really going to feed the Old World and kind of help sustain their population. So that'll be a good benefit for them. The New World will get different crops as well. Oh, obviously horses, right? Pigs, and wheat and other crops. Now, the big negative effect, of course, is diseases, right? So your Native Americans are going to be more susceptible to European diseases because they don't have those immunities. So especially things like smallpox, right, measles, influenza, are going to pretty much decimate the Native American population. So that would definitely be a negative effect. And something to know from the Columbian Exchange is that there's demographic and social change. So demographic in that large Native American populations die out. Also, you're going to have a mixing of races. Native Americans will marry Europeans. And social change, you know, how people live, right? As the Europeans kind of enforce patriarchy, new religions, those kind of things will create some social change. Okay, next topic, encomienda. Okay, so the Spanish are going to colonize Mexico, Texas, the Southwest, and California, and even Central and South America, but we're not going to worry about them for this particular test. Okay, so what is the encomienda system? So this is a plantation system where wealthy Spaniards are given large tracts of land in the Americas, and the labor that they're going to use will be the existing Native Americans. And basically, the Spanish come through and conquer so quickly, they take all the land, and they really only give the Native Americans the option of working their plantations or, you know, die out and starve. So they were technically free, they weren't technically slaves, but, you know, in my opinion, they're kind of slaves, right? They're basically forced to work this encomienda on the haciendas or plantations. Now, later they developed the mita system, which is where your Native Americans owe so many days of labor to the government. So it's like a tax or a tribute. You want to live here under our system, you owe us, you know, say 300 days of labor in the mines or on plantations or something else. So again, it's a way to kind of force their labor and ensure, you know, cheap and plentiful labor. Okay, lost my place. Okay, now where is this happening? I kind of talked about that. So definitely Mexico, a little bit in Texas in the Southwest, not so much in California. Okay, now why? Well, this is the system of cheap labor, right? And the encomienda is also very similar to feudalism, right? Where you've kind of got these serfs bound to the land and working the land. So in some ways, they're kind of reinforcing older ideas that are dying out in Europe. Okay, so what are some of the effects of encomienda? Well, that demographic and social change, definitely, right? Native Americans are no longer free. They're kind of reduced to this feudal life, right? And then, you know, diseases, hard work, those kind of things. Okay, so that moves us on to our caste system and mixed races. So something that the Spanish did not have in Spain would be the caste system, right? Now you had in the Middle Ages, you know, your nobles, your royalty, right, peasants, but now they've got a caste system based on race. And so your peninsulares are Spanish people born in Spain but have come over to Mexico. Creoles are Spanish people but born in Mexico or the New World. Now the two we want to look at are going to be mestizo. So mestizo would be a mix of Native American and Spanish. And then mulatto would be Black or African in Spanish. And then as we talked in class, the caste system gets even more complex when you start mixing, say, a mestizo and a mulatto. That's a whole new, I guess, race, right? Or classification. Okay, so that's something a little bit different. Now, we like to see that it shows, intermarriage, right? The Spanish are known for intermarrying with the Native Americans, right? More so than, say, the English. Okay, let's see, labor in all of the colonies. Okay, so we talked about the encomienda, right? So in your Spanish colonies, they're really going to rely on the encomienda system for cheap and forced labor. Now, the West Indies, so they try to enslave the Indians and force them to work the sugar plantations, but they die out, right? And so they'll quickly turn to African slaves. And so they're plentiful. The price of slaves has gone down, and unfortunately, they would work. I guess sugar was so profitable, and since that cost of slaves went down, they would work them extremely hard, long hours, no medical attention, little food, and they felt it was just cheaper to work them to death and order a new shipment of slaves rather than take care of them and have them for future use. So unfortunately, that's what happened. Okay, looking at your English colonies, now on occasion they would enslave Native Americans, usually after wars, right? Some of the Indian war captives they would enslave. Now the Indians were a little bit harder to enslave. They would run away, they'd go west, they definitely resisted that. Man, I mean, they had the perfect system. They had indentured servants. So an indentured servant is someone from Europe, particularly England, who signs a contract to come work in the colonies. And so your master in the colonies would pay your boat ride over, and then you'd have to work for him for 5 to 7 years, and that would pay off your debt. And so you'd probably be farming tobacco or rice or corn or something like that. Females would be domestic servants or nannies, something like that. And so they would work off that time. And there's so many people being pushed out of Europe that it was pretty easy to get plenty of indentured servants. Keep in mind the head right system. So the head right system said anyone who brings over an indentured servant gets 50 acres of free land. Well, I mean, they took it from the Native Americans, but so free land. And so this way you could develop pretty big plantations, right? Okay, I think we got that. So we did indentured servants, slaves. I think we've got that one. They come from Africa. We'll get into the Middle Passage and some of the little harder issues in the next unit. Okay, so let's get to Jamestown. All right, so Jamestown is our first colony, first permanent English colony. It was started by a joint stock company. So keep in mind that your British royalty did not really want to fund colonies at this point, but they let those joint stocks, like corporations, where you have many investors that pull their money together to spread out the risk. And those joint stock companies would finance these expeditions. Okay, so why would you finance an expedition to the New World? Well, you want to get rich, right? And so when the settlers land in Jamestown, they're looking for gold. They literally think they can find gold like Cortez and Pizarro. There's no gold in Virginia. Okay, so they're kind of wandering around looking for gold, and they only brought men. So they don't feel the need to farm or hunt or fish. Now, finally, Captain John Smith is going to get these guys in order, and he's going to say, if you don't work, you don't eat today. And so he's really going to make the settlers work. Now, the fact that they brought all men causes a few other problems. So perhaps if they had brought families, they would have started farming. You don't want your wife and kids to starve to death because you're looking for gold. Now, the other problem will be with the Native Americans. So your Native Americans believed in this gender balance, and they said, where are your women? Why didn't you bring them? If you truly want to settle here with us, why didn't you bring your women? just bringing all men shows us that I think you have a war party and you want to attack us. And so that's going to be another layer of mistrust. Okay. All right. So we got John Smith. Oh, another thing to know about John Smith, or just your leaders in Jamestown and Virginia and the colonies, is they were always trying to find new migrants. So remember in class how we talked about the fact that your life expectancy was pretty low in Jamestown and Virginia, right? Maybe you could live to 40 years. Some or all of your children would die before you did. So they always needed more people. And of course, they would advertise, right? So they'd advertise back in Europe, and it was pretty easy to get people to come over as indentured servants. And Smith and other leaders would talk about the plentiful land. There, you can have your own farm, and that's something that, peasants couldn't own land in Europe. So that'll be a big draw. Okay. House of Burgesses. Okay, so this is our first representative government, right? It's a mini parliament or mini Congress. So early on in Virginia, and so this is going to kind of set the stage for our democracy. So from the get-go, our colonists are used to democracy. And when we get closer to the American Revolution and the British want to take away that right, well, we're going to fight for it. Okay, Bacon's Rebellion. Okay, so not everything is all happy in Virginia, right? Actually, a lot of it seems pretty miserable by our standards today. So you've got a lot of indentured servants, right? And they realize they're not the rich planters, right? And so they're going to kind of have some tensions. And there's actually quite a bit of social and class tension in Virginia. So as your indentured servants get freed, they want land. Now, during Bacon's Rebellion, the 1670s, Governor Berkeley has a monopoly on the fur trade. And so he's given large tracts of land to his friends, wealthier people, and we're kind of out of land, right? And so these young, freed, indentured servants want more land. But Berkeley says, no, you cannot move west, because he doesn't want to upset the Indians, and he's buying, the fur pelts at a cheap price from the Indians and selling them back to Europe. Okay, so he wants to keep our Native Americans happy, right? And so he says, you can't move west. Well, your indentured servants, suddenly now they don't have representation in the House of Burgesses because you have to own property. And so they're feeling pretty disenfranchised. And finally, Nathaniel Bacon is going to take a stand. And so the first thing they do, well, they blame the Native Americans. So they go attack them. Well, and there were some Native American attacks, and Berkeley said, don't retaliate. Okay, so they attack the Indians, and then they march into town. They march into Jamestown, burn down the Capitol. Governor Berkeley runs away. And of course, in true Jamestown style fashion, what happens to Bacon? He gets sick and dies, right? Dies the next day after a fever and dysentery. So then the rebellion falls apart. Okay, what's important about this rebellion is it's the first sign of class conflict, right? So your lower class freed and indentured servants against the wealthy planters in the government. And then also, so now indentured servants have kind of proved that they're unruly, right? And they have demands, and they want their own things, and that they can't be controlled. So Bacon's Rebellion is actually going to start to make your planters want to look for African slaves. And so from this point on, we'll start to see the shift from indentured servants to African slaves. And also by now, the cost has gone down. Okay, actually, this test is going to be in 3 parts because I only have 15 minutes. So tune in to the 3rd video in just a minute.